in the Chinese system, we probably have, I can at least show 3 evidences to show that the Chinese know about the flood. We have a word for boat, and you have 8 people in a boat.
That's the character.
That's the character.
Oh, wow.
For boat. And so you wonder why 8 people?
We oftentimes look at the Bible through Western eyes here in America, but is there anything in the East that can help substantiate the claims of the Bible from culture and history?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Welcome everyone to another episode of LED Live. It's so glad to have you here with us today, and we have another special guest on our show, a guest that really sprang from a conversation one morning. I remember I came into the office and I was talking about a sermon that I had been listening to, and the presenter was Anil Kanda, and he was talking about how different cultures have these elements of biblical heritage and biblical history and culture, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And one of those was the Chinese culture. So I was talking about it in the office, and Michael, who's not on camera, he's always behind the camera. Hi, Michael. He told us, I just heard something like this. There was a pastor who came to our church and presented this very thing. And so we asked him, well, can you invite him or see if he's available to be on our show? And lo and behold, we have Dr. Wang with us here this morning. This is Dr. Samuel Wang, and he specializes in missions, but he's done a lot of research on Chinese culture and history, especially as it relates to biblical history and biblical knowledge. So this is going to be, I think, a very exciting and enlightening show that you're going to help us with today. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so how is it, have you always been a Christian? Was this something that always interested in you, or, have you come from a different background than that?
I was born in China,
Okay.
raised up in China, and when communism was at its full force at the
Okay.
time, I came to Christianity when I turned into 30 years old.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Now, I've heard stories of Christians in China, like churches that would meet in their basements, and they would have to bring one person in at a time, and sometimes it would take hours to get the whole church body in the room. Was it kind of like that?
At a time when religion was not allowed, there was about 30 years, and from the 1950s to all the way to the 80s, any religion, including Christianity, was not allowed. So at those days, when you tried to have a meeting, it was very sacred. And
What would happen if you got caught?
you would be put into, at least to be detained or put into prison.
So if you were a repeat offender, then you might get into more severe trouble, like long-term jail or even...
Exactly. Many people get arrested because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very similar to what happens in like Russia and those kinds of places. Same thing. Anywhere communism has been, same kind of thing. It's always, they did everything in secret. They get arrested. Some people wind up in jail for a long time. But the gospel's powerful.
It really makes you think about how luxuriously we have it here.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you listen to these stories of what other people do just to go to church, and then you talk to young people today, and it's like, I don't want to go to church today. And other people in the other parts of the world are risking their lives for this.
I met a pastor in Texas, and I think he was from the Ukraine, and he kind of grew up a little bit old school, and he says he remembers when his brother and sister went to go be baptized. They had to go before the church board, and they grilled them on their beliefs. It's like, if you're going to claim this, you better know it, you better believe it, and you better be serious about it. It was like a very solemn, serious thing. It wasn't like, oh yeah, great, we're going to dunk you in the tank.
Yeah. I guess a question right off the bat is, China was always, in my mind, Buddhist, but maybe that's not the case.
Well, Buddhists came to China at about 2,000 years ago, a little less than that. So it was introduced much later. the Chinese history is longer.
Yeah.
And so if I have a chart here actually, if we look at this chart and compare that with the biblical chronology, you can see creation happened at 404 BC.
Mhm.
And that's how we have our calendar is based upon that date. And so you have a 27 when Jesus was 30 years old, he was baptized. 31 AD, he was crucified and ascended to heaven. That all dated from that date, 4004 BC.
Okay.
Now, if you go from there and then at 2348 BC, then you have the the flood. That's 1656 years later. And then 101 years later, you have the Tower of Babel. Now, before all of this time, the world had one language.
Was it Chinese?
Providentially,
Is the language in heaven going to be Chinese?
we're not quite sure about what language that was.
That's awesome. That's awesome, yeah.
Now, I want to just show you that the beginning of the Chinese, it was just 42 years after the Tower of Babel. Then we had our first dynasty. That was about 4,200 years ago. So roughly before Buddhism come in, we had another 2,200 of Chinese history.
42 years from the flood? Or no, from the Tower of
From
Babel?
the Tower of Babel.
Okay.
So,
2 years.
do you have written records that go back that far?
Oh, yes.
That's incredible.
The
It is.
Chinese, today, basically we have 5 ancient writing systems in the world.
Okay.
And like Sumeria
Egyptian.
and Egyptian and the Mayan and Greek. Anyway, I forgot the other one. But Chinese is one of them. Chinese is also the only one. I think the one is Babylon. The only one that survived until today. This is the only one.
Right.
All the other ancient writing systems were gone. So if you're asking for any ancient record, the first one probably is not the Jewish. The oldest, the ancient one is the Chinese.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So I have a question about the flood. So are the Chinese like they all talk about there was a flood, a worldwide flood? That's part of your history?
Well, in the Chinese system, we probably have, I can at least show 3 evidences to show that the Chinese know about the flood. They are the descendants of Noah's family. And number 1 is that we have a word for boat. And you have 8 people in a boat.
That's the character.
That's the character
Oh, wow.
for boat.
Boat. Okay, boat. This is a Chinese character, boat, in a modern writing system. It has only 3 parts. Let's look at these 3 parts one by one. The first part is a vessel. Is a vessel on the water. Basically, it means boat already. It means the boat. The second part, middle part, means 8. Is 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The third part means month. In Chinese, in Chinese language, Mandarin, or you can say Mandarin, month normally represent a person. Like 1 month means 1 person, 2 months means 2 persons. Remember, there's 8 people were in the ark when the flood, when the rain came.
And so you wonder why 8 people?
Yeah.
Now today, if you
pretty
run into if you have been to any Chinese restaurant or whatever, you check on their phone number. Normally ended with 8.
Oh, interesting.
And the Chinese likes the lucky number of 8. You wonder why? Because all
They're the lucky ones to survive.
because the Noah's family have 8 people. The whole world come from there.
Wow.
I think it's in their mind, the number 8 is a lucky number. So the number 8 is very special. Now this is number 1. There is one more that would, you cannot defeat that. The Bible said, if lucky, normally you live like 70 years. And if you're strong, you can go to 80, 90. My mother passed away this year. She was 96.
Oh, wow.
And
I'm sorry.
but the Chinese say, no, you are supposed to live 120 years. Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's what it was shortened to. wasn't it?
That was the only time that was given in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 6, verse 13. It's, the world was wild. God said, I will still give you 120 years. And that is recorded, kept in the Chinese. So the Chinese think the lifespan was 120. It should be. But later it got this, we got it deteriorated. And then now it's getting shorter.
It always seems like the longest living people, though, come from China. Like when you see the 110, 111, 112, and they like seem like they're always from a Asian culture.
Yeah, there is a book like China Studies is produced by
Colin Campbell.
Yeah, Dr. Campbell, and it's talking about they follow different lifestyles, and they conclude the Chinese lifestyle is the one that is more healthy. It can be helpful, I guess.
Sure. Okay, so you have writings that go back long periods of time. But if you have writings that go back so far, why is it that Chinese people aren't necessarily aware of all these things today, or even Americans or anybody else? Like, why is this, if you have it written down and you have it, in history, why is it so hard to find?
Where was the departure?
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about history, like China, India, these people have a long history. And you have to study for many years to finish. It's not like you go to an American school and third grade, you finish it. However, there is a change. That change, let me just make it very short. The change happened in 1840 when the British came trying to sell their opiums to China. And they defeated China. And this, China, from then on, China started thinking, what went wrong? I mean, they came with the gunpowder, with guns, but the gunpowder was invented by our ancestors. We used it peacefully. But when it went to West, it's for war. And now we were getting even defeated by these guys. And so they're trying to find the reason, how can we become strong and not to be bullied by these people. And from then on, they say, oh, we have to learn from them. We learn from them, then we can defeat them. So they send people come to the West to learn. That's where the turning point starts. The very first thing that was introduced to China was evolution. Survival of the fittest.
1840,
around that kind of timeline. And starting from there, later on, you have communism, one after another, atheism. All of this were introduced in the last 140 or 80 some years. And that changed. Not only the Chinese thinking, but also how the world looking at China. So the previous traditions were kind of forgotten. We started to adopt so-called, new culture and new knowledge. And that was a turning point.
Wow. Okay. So what more can you share with us about these things from the past?
But even though that was a turning point, however, every culture, you still got tradition. Like I mentioned earlier, we got the Chinese writings. It still remained the same, 4,000 years old. Now we got the Bible here. The Bible is only 3,500 years old. So anything we have put in writing was older than the Hebrew Bible. In other words, if we find anything from the Chinese culture, we did not copy that from the Hebrews. We had it prior to the Hebrews. Now we have the Chinese characters, I can show you just from the character itself that the Eden story was recorded over there. You ready for some of those?
Okay,
I want to see
let's
this.
see it.
Yeah. Let's just simply look at, a word for talking about heaven.
Okay.
Okay.
And heaven is, you have a one stroke there, and then you have a man. So in other words, a man is a pattern after the one above. Is a man from above, that's heaven. So we have a man which is written similar, like heaven. So even for that word alone, that you can see that this is how man come from. We patterned after heaven.
Oh wow.
And
So
This
so
line at
this
the top is
this
heaven.
is the man. That's heaven.
yeah, this
line.
is top from
Yeah.
above.
Yeah.
And then this is, of course, is a man.
Yeah.
And once you put these two together, then you have the man from above.
Wow.
He is heaven. Now, how to write man? And then the lower part is just how we write a man. So in a way, you can see when the Bible said a man was made in the image of God. And then you can see in the Chinese writings, the ancestors, they were so clever. They just coded in such a way that you can still see it. Even today, we see that. And
I think it's really neat that you guys have this language that is not only a visual representation, but it's like you're reading it as well. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm a picture person. Like I learned from that, but I just think that's neat that your characters tell a story as well as, it's your words.
the Chinese, we call this tian. This is a Chinese way of saying tian. To me, I think I couldn't find any better theology than the Chinese theology. Let me explain that to you. In tian, and this is the name for the creator.
Okay.
And then how do you say what is most important in life? And we still say that's tian. And that's the most important thing. How about space, skies and universe? Because it come from tian, it come from heaven. So we still say tian. We still use that because there's no other better measurement.
So if you said I'm going in a rocket ship to outer space, you would say I'm going to
tian.
10.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then not only that, each day, you have a day each day. What is the measurement for our day? In English, you have a day. No, for the Chinese, you have a tian. You have heaven as a measurement of the time that you receive each day. So here you have not only God as creator, you have him as the most important. You have the space you live from him, the time that you live is also from him. And that is exactly what Genesis 1:1 says. In English and also in Chinese, we missed all the English translation missed the one part in Genesis 1:1, missed the fourth letter in the Hebrew. That is basically talking about God is the beginning and the end. It's relating not only God created heaven and earth, but he is also the beginning and the end. That part is lost. But however, that is all contained in this one word, tian, in the Chinese.
So I think it's really neat that in English we say that God is the I am, right? Well, in Hebrew, I guess he said that as well. But you could just complete that sentence with whatever. God is your everything. I am your provider. I am your God. I am, So yeah, it's kind of neat that same sort of thing translates into Chinese as well.
Yes, the Chinese, all the Bible story in Genesis in the beginning happened in the Garden of Eden. And so the Chinese retain the Garden of Eden. We have a character, like this one here, and you can see in the garden you have trees. I mean, this original Chinese is very pictographic. You can see a tree. And of course, then how about a garden? How about the Eden? Now, Eden, the Bible said, Eden, you have 4 rivers flowing out of Eden. Now, today we have seen many pictures, and Eden is flat. That is not very good. Eden is a high mountain. the highest, the biggest waterfalls coming from Eden, because the water flowing out of Eden is going to form 4 big rivers. If you're going to become 4 big rivers, it must be from a high place. And in the Revelation, it says it's a square. But you look at the Chinese character for Eden, for garden or Eden.
It's a square.
It's a square.
Square.
And
Like
in the
4
middle, you
sections.
can see there's 4 rivers flowing to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this shows the earliest Chinese. They were, before the Bible was written, human being has lived for 2,500 years. Now, how do they know the revelation of God? Of course, by word of mouth. And ancient cultures like India, like Chinese, they were exposed to the oral version. And they preserve, especially the Chinese, they preserve it, the oral revelation of God, in their writings, in the tradition, and also in their classics. And later I will share a little more. But let me, maybe I share you just some stories. You have, God told them there's one restriction. You don't touch that tree. And in this word, you can see a tree in the middle, right? And then you have a mouse. God said the only thing you need to restrain yourself is that your mouse will not touch from that tree.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is the word for restraint.
Wow.
How else can you
Right. Explain
explain that?
Yeah. That's amazing.
that you're not supposed to eat something. I mean that. Yeah.
From a tree.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And however, this is a Nining woman. She came to these 2 trees. Now, the Chinese
Love it.
know that she was facing the tree of knowledge and good and evil. Her back was against the tree of life, so she was facing this way.
Wow.
Because the Bible actually didn't say that clearly, but you read it, when they were expelled from the Garden of Eden, the last one they saw was the tree of life on their way out. So evidently, they were eating from this tree of knowledge and good and evil, then God expelled them. So they come out from there. So this is the Chinese word for greed, for covet. I mean,
Yeah. Right.
where did you get that? The first person have the covet, it was under the tree of.
Yeah, there'd be no reason to tell it that way unless you had the prior history
And
and knowledge.
And God also showed to them, if you eat of that, you will die. And so you see a tree there, and you see the hands, and then 2 mouths. So you can see these 2 people eat from
Adam
this
and
tree.
Eve.
This is
Wow.
the Chinese word for to die. Why
Wow. Wow.
why they have to
That's so
die?
exciting.
It is
I'm
That's
sorry.
amazing.
This
That's
tree and
incredible.
fruit, that's-
It is incredible. I mean, do the Chinese do they talk about this or recognize it, or is it just you've written it so many times?
you
just-
gotta you take it for granted. I think that I see something interesting. Whatever is the most precious thing in your culture, that's the thing you lose. For instance, for the Jewish, they were looking for Messiah.
Yeah, it was written in
It
their
was written
alphabet,
in,
their
in-
language,
in
their money,
language.
the dirt.
And they
You
lost
name
it.
it. Their whole economy
When Messiah came,
lost it.
they lost it.
Wow.
They got the GPS, but they couldn't find it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with the Chinese. It was there, but somehow we lost it.
Wow.
We didn't completely lose it, but still we just lost the majority of it.
So I guess how did it get so shifted away from
It's
from
like anything
its true
else,
meaning?
though. It's like Satan is always there to blind the eyes of men, right? He's always trying to hide what God is trying to reveal.
In plain sight.
And it's like, what is the last book of the Bible called? It's called Revelation. And
Right.
what is it revealing? Jesus Christ,
Yeah. Yeah.
What is God always trying to do with his people? He's trying to cover them. Satan's always trying to take, stuff off. I mean,
Right.
there's just a war.
Right.
Wow. This
Yeah, let me just share you. This is probably the last one I can share about the characters.
No,
You know-
please more.
Yeah, God does not stop there.
Mm.
Okay.
You know, the Chinese not only know what had happened,
Mhm.
they have the sad story of the fall. We have many of those, but for the time's sake, we just show just a sample. But the Chinese also know the plan of salvation.
Mm.
And they depict it like in this word, you have a fallen, disobedient man. And obviously he's falling.
So he's upside down.
He's upside down.
Okay.
Wow.
And then you have another man,
He's noble.
a noble man. He's
Standing
standing,
up.
straight. So this noble man come to help to save the fallen man from being falling further. And that is unexpected.
Yeah.
That word is unexpected blessing. The Chinese word is unexpected blessing. You are supposed to die, hey, but because of that standing, obedient, noble man, you're not going to die.
Wow.
Wow.
And in that one word, you
Wow.
can see the
There's the gospel.
complete plan of salvation.
Together. Just
Right.
Wow.
rejoice, give
right there.
thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, this is also, this word have several meanings. It's also rejoice because you are saved from being dead, and then now, of course, you give thanks. This is also the word for happiness.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Unexpected grace.
Yeah.
And all contained in one word. So, I mean, as a Chinese, I say it's really fortunate to know the Chinese because we can see some extra biblical evidence
Yeah.
to give full support
Yeah.
of the Hebrew Bible.
So this being Chinese history, how do the Chinese react to it? Because I'm sure some Christians, I know it has to be done in a delicate way, but is this used to bring Chinese people to Christ, and are they receptive to it?
Yes, you know, the last year was COVID, and I was locked down in the house. I couldn't do anything. So I started to share some, make a 1-minute video. I can share some of these things I did. 1 minute, one video, the highest within 2 months. It's about 400,000 viewers.
Wow.
And I did about 30 of them, average about 200,000 viewers.
Wow.
And
Praise God.
People are hungry.
Well, you have 2 billion people. I mean.
but I only did it in a WeChat group. I mean, this is just one of the platforms
Yeah.
that you can see when the Chinese see. It's there when you tell them, oh yeah, I never noticed that.
Wow.
They just embrace it.
Wow.
It's like something right under your nose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what a neat thing to do is to really take something that they're familiar with and to just expand their opening of understanding a little bit more. It's a really great way to reach them.
Oh, that's really
Now,
super neat.
if this is is more literal, and many people they think, I don't get it. But there are also traditions. There are also historical sites which are still there today,
Okay.
which shows the 4,000 years of worship. Now, the one that you see on the screen here, the Chinese called the descendant of Yan and Huang. Yan, I would say he probably is Shem, because his name in the Chinese Candong, Xian, phonetically very similar. We have 3 names recorded. We have Noah, we have Shem, we have Japheth. The 3 names in the Chinese Fu Xi. These 3 names were recorded, but we didn't record Han, because Han
Was the cursed one.
is a black sheep, and he's
Yeah.
and the Chinese emphasize respecting parents, and there's
That's
no
fun.
other culture
That's
in the world
interesting.
expand the 5th commandment
Mhm.
to 16,000 words.
16,000 words.
The fifth
The
commandment.
5th commandment.
Honor your
So the
father
5th commandment is honor
and
your
your mother.
father and your mother, that
Yeah.
your days may
The
be
Chinese
long.
expanded to such a vast field. It goes to not only human parents. It goes to your creator, your leaders, your officials, and your elderly.
That's why there's so much respect.
And even in the family, if like your first son and first daughter, they normally help raise the younger ones. So this respect goes, just extend. It's not simply parent. The connotation, 16,000 words. I don't see any other culture have this kind of understanding.
So, do you think the longevity? I mean, we mentioned that it seems to be that the Asian culture lives longer than the rest of us, right?
That's right.
Part of the blessing.
Yeah,
God keeps his
you wonder. I mean,
promises.
it's the only 10 Commandment with a blessing like that attached to it.
God's words is what He said. That's what He do. If you honor and do His way, and He will honor you. Yeah. So the Huangdi is another one that we consider to be our ancestor, and he was about 4,000 years ago as a legendary king. And this, to some of our viewers, may not be so familiar, but however, you can see these different places. This is where the Chinese worship heaven, and even today we still have. You can go to that site. This is this one many people have heard is the Qin Shi Huangdi, is Emperor Qin, who was the one who connected the Great Wall.
Okay.
Yeah, 2,200 years ago, just about 200 years before Christ. He was the one, and he also dedicated that place as a place to worship heaven.
The Chinese
And when you
wall
mean
was there.
heaven, not necessarily just the environment, but like God.
No,
God of
God,
heaven.
Creator
Yeah,
God.
Yeah.
They know. They say before when God, in the beginning there was all darkness and void and darkness, and then God came and separated darkness and from light, and the 5 elements start to play in place, and then you have heaven and the earth, you have everything, you have a man and then woman. The order as recorded in the Chinese is the same as it recorded in the Hebrew Bible. Only that the Chinese recorded about 500 to 700 years earlier. So for those who are questioning and even thinking the Bible is a Western culture, come on,
Yeah.
it's Asian.
Yeah.
Okay, to start with, it's Asian.
Seriously.
Well, the wise men coming to seek out Jesus had something that they were reading, right? I mean, they
Yes.
came. I don't know. We typically
What do you
think that
think
they came
about-
from Asia, but
About that.
I
That's
can tell you that in the Chinese, the first Chinese dictionary, it was in 100 years, 100 AD. And it says the word about this, our family name. It's the born of a woman. And then interpretation of that is a woman, a mother of antiquity, conceived by heaven, give birth to a son. He is called the Son of Heaven.
and this predates Jesus.
The record in that dictionary is 100 years after Jesus. However,
Okay.
that was predates Jesus.
Right.
That prophecy, that explanation of that word. And we have, many people know how to say ni hao in Chinese. And the word hao means good. What is hao? It's the seed of the woman.
Really?
The seed of the woman, the only hope for humanity.
Mm.
And he is the one who brings, whenever we say ni hao, we're saying the seed of the woman bring blessing to you. It's a little more than to say good morning. You're saying that the seed of the woman. So the Chinese have a lot about this. I'm showing you these altars are the places to worship heaven. This is in Xi'an, and many people know this one, Beijing,
Oh yeah.
the Temple of Beijing. This was built 600 years ago.
Wow.
And this is a once a year service in Chinese history. We have a daily service morning and evening, which is done in the family. So the father normally is the one who worship in the morning and the evening, offers incense. Sometimes we just connect incense with Buddhists. But
Idols.
What
Worship
does
the
the
idols.
incense represent in Chinese culture? I mean, I know what it represents in the Hebrew culture, but what does it represent in Chinese?
It's a good question. The culturally things, the meaning keep on changing. But incense basically in the Chinese means life. My lifetime, my descendant. I am bringing my descendant. You have blessed me with a descendant, so I'm coming to worship you. That's basically what it is. So when that incense stopped, means this family no more descendant. So it doesn't come. That family wouldn't come to offer incense anymore. So incense is the way. Our life is also short. Just like incense, you're burning, it's gone. And you need to make the best use of it to give thanks to the one who gives you life. That's why they bring incense. That's the way to worship heaven. I know it's similar in the Revelation. We make our prayers, and it was like incense. Now this temple is also there in China, but if you notice it, there's no images. For once a year, the emperor will come, and then you look at the structure, the 3 layers, similar like the sanctuary. I mean, it doesn't look the same, but you have the altar. But hey, you compare the Hebrews with the Chinese, Israel with the Chinese. Israel, they were taken out of Egypt, and for 3 months, God gave them manna, brought them to Mount Sinai, and then Moses went up. Only 40 days. They didn't see Moses.
Right.
Then they start to do what?
Build
Party.
idols.
Party. Golden Cove.
that's right.
Golden Cove, and they start having
Worship
image.
idols.
Worship idols. But the Chinese didn't see anything either. The Chinese didn't see any images for 4,000 years until 1911. No idols. 1911,
Is that the Boxer Rebellion?
the Republic of China was formed.
Okay.
So
And
there's no
became
more emperor.
communists.
There's no more emperor. Therefore, at that time, they associate the temple worship as a privilege of the emperor. So when they did done away with the emperor, so they also done away with this temple worship. But also Saint San, who was the founder of the Republic of China, he was a Christian. I am not sure whether he know. Maybe it's because he also know that Christ is the sacrifice.
So the emperor was acting not just as a civil authority, but as a priestly authority.
Right. It's just
So
like
he's-
high priest.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did they
That
call
is
themselves
interesting.
Christians?
No.
No.
No, Christian, even in the Bible, you don't call yourself Christians.
True.
The name Christian was given by the Gentiles to those who follow God.
At Antioch.
So
So what did the Chinese call themselves? Was there a name, or it was just a way of life?
they just simply call them the Son of God.
Okay.
And just like the children of God, you're the sons of God.
So we've talked about Chinese language and landmarks, but what about the names? Because in Hebrew, a lot of the names have attributes of God. So is that the same in the Chinese culture?
Very much so. The Chinese name, every name has meaning. It's not only have a sound. You need to have a good sound and the good writing, and also good meaning. Because like parents, we give a name to our children, and for life, that's the time they were going to be called. And that concept, the value system, that aspiration in that name needs to motivate that person for life. And like for my name is Wang Jingzhi, and this is taken from an ancient Chinese poem. It means worshiping heaven with trembling heart and the spirit.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I wish more people like understood the names and what they mean.
Did you name your kids with meaning?
No.
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 I guess culture are different.
Yeah.
My
did?
mom took that
Yeah, I
very
did too.
very seriously. She actually bought like African books and the names and their meanings. She went through it. That's how I got Kendi, the loved one. She just wanted for my name to have some kind of significance, and that's true in a lot of African countries. Like it has to have some kind of significance because they know the power of a name. You're calling that all the time. I mean, think of the Bible, how we call or in a sense invoke the specific name of God to help us in that time. And it's the same with us today.
That's why I think it's funny that Isaac would call Jacob the deceiver. I mean, it's like, you're just like, oh, you're a little cheater. I don't know. It just seems funny because as a parent and you see that newborn baby, it's like you just want them to thrive in life, and why wouldn't you name that? It's interesting.
Where do you think the misconception comes from? Is it a misconception? I don't know. But the worldwide view that Christianity started in Western culture, where do you think that came from?
Well, in the Bible, we know Jesus was crucified by Romans. And the Christianity went into 300 years Hellenization. They were kind of Romanized. And so I give you one comparison you can see. You look at the Jesus teaching, Beatitudes. Beatitudes, every single one, it have to do with either your behavior or your being. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. You know, blessed are the peacemaker. Your peacemaker is how you should behave. Like poor in spirit is your character, it's your state. However, when it's moved to the Hellenized tendency this way, and then you have the Apostles' Creed, you have all the creed, and every single one is just you just need to have intellectual consent. Has nothing to do with your being or your behavior. So a practical, a life living Christianity all of a sudden become intellectual exercise. And before you know God is to do His commandment. Like the beauty of the soul is the harmony and obedience to the will of God. That was the true beauty of the soul. But that is the way also shows the true knowledge of God. But then it was come to Greek way of Christianity. You start to talk about the attributes of God. You start to talk about Trinity. I mean, this is so Greek. To know God is not to know whether He's a Trinity or not. It's to know Him in your life, in your practice, in your being or in your doing. But the Christianity now, what we learn, you know, every church is busy to produce a set of beliefs. It's so Greek and not Hebrew. And then we are trying to defend some doctrines, which is, you look at it from the Greek perspective. I mean, like Paul said, you know, circumcision is nothing, uncircumcision is nothing. Some of these things is not so important. What is important is like what Solomon said, you know, fear God and keep His commandments. And that is whole duty. That's a calling that for us. So I would say the tendencies is that we have some the Greek influence upon the Christianity.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So you said you're going to go into some prophecy?
Well, you know, we talk about the Chinese characters. If that's in the Chinese writings about the oral version of God, if also the tradition of worshiping God, they call that the border sacrifice. You have to worship, bring the sacrifice outside of the capital. And of course, you see that is a fulfillment of Jesus, because Jesus was offered outside of the city, outside of Jerusalem.
Right.
So if you look at Hebrew chapter 13, you have to walk out of the gate. It's the border sacrifice. He was the border sacrifice. It's not offered within the city. So that is always there in the Chinese. And for all of us, we know the biggest Chinese day festival is the Chinese New Year. And the Chinese New Year, you keep it as a Sabbath. You know, the first day you don't do anything. The Chinese New Year is just like the Jewish Passover. We have it. The Passover, of course, is you can say is a prophecy about the coming Messiah.
Yes.
But celebrate it in this cultural way. And it's 14 days, you know, from day one and to the 14th of the day, they have the Paschal lamb and so forth. Hey, Chinese have the same thing.
Wow.
From day one of the lunar calendar of the first month to the 15th, you celebrate the Chinese New Year. And during the first 3 days, at least the first day, you don't cook. And they have the firecrackers, you have the fireworks and so forth. It is that this day there is a big disaster is coming. So you need, the celebration is just somehow that is being removed. So we celebrate that the disaster is gone. It's just like in the Passover, the killing of the firstborn because of the lamb. The Jewish put blood over the doorpost.
Oh, wow.
The Chinese put the red covenant over the doorpost. So every year you celebrate the same, even the Chinese 过年, literal translation is a Passover. It's the same.
Well, the Jews do that because that's their history. So I'm wondering why the Chinese do it.
Because Chinese were exposed to the oral revelation. So they knew it. They have it right from the Tower of Babel. They have the knowledge of God,
Wow.
the revelation of God. They got it. The Jewish God called Abraham trying to restore what was lost.
Yeah.
But that was not Jewish was not the first time that God did it.
Yeah, because Balaam was clearly a prophet to a people that was not, part of the Hebrew culture. So, God was working with different cultures all along the way, and perhaps that was, that was just a symbol that God chose, that the blood was going to be over the door of your house.
So that's why the China's flag is red.
The Chinese color is red.
Yeah.
And because it's red, it means blessing. Even for wedding, wedding and you have to be in red. In red, if you look at back, at least we can see the blood, but it's also wedding is a covenant.
Yes.
And today the virginity, it doesn't mean much today, but however, in the Bible, when the husband and wife are entering into the covenant relationship, you need to see blood. So blood is the thing. That's blessing, seal the ceremony, seal the relationship. That is in the Chinese culture, and which is normally lost in the West. And people have no clue.
I think it's so neat to hear the historical reasoning why the color red is really. Because I think red when I think Chinese, but I had no idea that there was these little
It's all
ties
biblical.
into the Bible. Yeah,
It is all biblical.
it's beautiful.
But it's also interesting and amazing that all that is there, and yet how much of it is understood?
How much of it is Christian at this point?
The actual number is hard to know, but I would say,
5%, 10%,
we have about 80 million
80 million Christians.
Christians in China alone.
But out of billions, that's probably
It's still
fair
a
number.
small fraction, but many people retain some concept here and there.
Yeah, because I'm assuming it's taught in schools, right? Because this is your history.
But there another thing is that Satan, as we know, is trying to reverse everything.
That's actually a point I want to touch on a little bit, if you can, because it's like you're telling us all this stuff, but today you go and ask the average Chinese person, they're probably not thinking along these lines. It doesn't mean that to them. So another thing is one of the creatures that's highly revered in Chinese culture is the dragon. But the Bible tells us the dragon is our enemy. So how did this get turned around where it's like the dragon is highly upheld, and yet the dragon as a biblical symbol is our enemy?
Very good question. The dragon, I have mentioned three things: the tradition, and Chinese writings, and the Chinese classics. So in China, we don't have a Bible, but we have classics. The Chinese classics is the one that is authentic, where bona fide Chinese culture. Dragon comes from the folk culture. It was developed much later.
So it's like fairy tales.
The fairy
type
tale
stuff.
thing. It was
Legends.
never was that it was recorded in Chinese classics. It was not there.
Gotcha.
The Chinese, actually, we call ourselves the ambassador of the truth, ambassador of Tao. That's how we name ourselves. And another name for us is the people of the land of God, 神州儿女.
So do you have any conflicting, so you have folklore over here and it talks about the dragon. Do you have anything in the literature that says the opposite, or speaks differently, or names the dragon as the enemy, or talks about a serpent or something like that? Like the Genesis story.
The word actually appeared, the word dragon appeared in the first book of the Book of Changes, which was another interesting fact for you, probably. The Bible was written by 40 authors over 1,600 years. The Book of Changes was written over 2,500 years by 87 authors.
Okay.
And it's consistent. So don't tell me there's only one book that was written over a long period of time by different authors.
Yeah.
There was another one, 87 authors, 2,500 years. In that book, a dragon was mentioned. but it's not the concept as we have culturally have today. Like you just your new year you play the dragon game and dragon dance. You don't have that in the classics. And I can show you something just to say what is in the classics. I show you two important names people know. One is Lao Tzu, one is Confucius.
Okay.
These two people are the contemporary of Daniel the prophet in the Hebrew culture,
Okay.
about 500 or 600 years before Christ. And in the Old Testament, the book of Daniel have 12 chapters. The Catholic Bible has 14 chapters. And however, it is the shortest book, have the most complete description, prophecies about the mission of the Messiah. And
Repentance and remission of sin, like what Daniel talks about.
yes, and not only that, the 2300 days prophecy is talking about, the cut off the Messiah and the 6 missions of the Messiah, and it covers all his life, everything. However, at the same time in China, at this time, I want to show what these two sages in the Chinese history, what they said about the most important part in the Chinese culture. Now let's hear Lao Tzu, what he said. Lao Tzu left a book, is about 5,000 words. Daniel has about 10,000 words. So Lao Tzu is even
More
shorter.
condensed. Yeah.
It has mentioned about the holy man 29 times. And he talks about a lot about the holy man, but I would just bring one here. And he says, he who therefore said the holy man is not, he is talking about the holy man, is the holy man himself is talking about his own mission. He said, he who is disgraced for the kingdom is the Lord of the kingdom. He who suffers for the kingdom is the king of the universe.
Wow. Like Isaiah.
This is about 600 years before Christ was born. And what can you make out of that? This is, let me just show you another one, which is what Confucius is talking about. Many people know about Confucius. The Western scholarship, I think they made a mistake about Confucianism. This that Confucius was a founder of Confucianism, which is not true. Confucius was the compiler of the writings at his time. So he compiled them together, but he was not the founder. Today, the scholarship understand they made a mistake. So they're changing Confucianism into the name that we Chinese use, like Rujia. Rujia is to make you soft. It's through the silent influence to change your stony heart to make you soft. That's basically Rujia. And Confucius had a lot of teachings, very good. I would just mention one. This is a mystery to many scholars because he said, if truly a king were to arise, it would still require 30 years for his love to be manifested.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Who could that be talking about?
He was 500 years before Christ.
Wow.
Wow.
And there was a time in Analects, it was recorded, people come to ask him, are you the holy man? He said, no, I'm not. Then this guy is asking, were the first 3 emperors, was this a holy man? He said, no. How about the 5 kings? No. And how about the 3 royal emperors? No. And then this man was very surprised. Then he said, who actually is this holy man? Confucius was greatly moved, and he answered, the holy man is in the West. And if you look at the map, look at the map where Jesus was born to China, it's west of China. So if you put all these Chinese descriptions about the holy man, about the holy king, and only one man fit. Who was born as a king, waited for 30 years to publicly demonstrate love.
What I think is amazing about that is people always say, well, isn't it going to be like, a lot of people who, never got a chance to choose God or whatever like this. This is like a evidence of God mercifully reaching out to many different cultures and civilizations with a similar understanding of what's really going on.
I think the spiritual heritage from the Chinese can not only help the Chinese or Asians, but maybe it also can be helpful to our Western people. At least now you can see some extra biblical evidence which supports the Bible.
Yeah.
Good.
So here I think it would be an interesting point to touch on if you have anything on this. A lot of people say that the Sabbath was only a Jewish concept. Do you have anything in Chinese literature or heritage that talks about the Sabbath?
Oh, of course. Let me mention it again so that we make it clear. The Bible was written 3,500 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Sabbath was recorded in Genesis chapter 2.
Sure.
Now, that's only 3,500 years ago. The Chinese have a book which was older, by 500 years ago, which is the Book of Changes. In this Book of Changes, in the chapter 24, and it says this: friend comes without blame. To and the furrow goes away. On the seventh day comes this return. This is the course of heaven. Now
So this was written 3,000 years ago.
4,000.
4,000. Yeah, sorry. 3,500 plus 500.
Yes.
4,000.
Yeah, this is probably the earliest
Close to the second
Record.
chapter of Genesis.
of the Sabbath. It didn't say the Sabbath, but it says it comes return every seventh day. It
context.
returns, and this is not the movement of the sun or moon or earth, but it's the course of heaven. Heaven comes every seventh day.
So in your language, like the pictographic language, the word for Sabbath, is there a word for Sabbath, or is it just seventh day, or how is it written and described?
We have the two words. One is a man resting against a tree.
Okay.
It's found at rest. And the Sabbath in the Chinese, the ancient language, it's the Tian Xiu is heaven's rest. It's not human rest.
Yeah.
A heaven's rest. And then we have another word. She is your mind, your spirit, and your self-mind rest. Put to rest. Put to rest at where? I think if you put these two together, you put it against the tree of life. That's where you find your rest. Because hey, just like the cell phone, when it's come to 20%, 10%, where can you rest your mind if you find a charger?
Plug, yeah.
Plug, recharge it. Then you be peaceful, restful. And our life comes to our energy level. It's come to 10%, 5%. If we can be connected with the tree of life,
Amen.
then we are finally
Find peace.
peace,
Rest.
restful. And that is depicted in the Chinese word. And just in case people don't know that is about the Sabbath, this is how they kept it. It says, thunder within the earth, this is, and the image, the king of the antiquity closes, the passes at the day of its arrival. And the merchants and strangers didn't go about, and the ruler didn't travel through the provinces. This is how they keep that day.
Right.
So if that is not the Sabbath, I don't know what that is.
Right.
And the Chinese have a 4 words, 七日来福. Every seventh day come back, returns every seventh day. It's an idiom in the Chinese.
Okay.
So we do have a Chinese.
Now, the
Interesting.
Chinese calendar is 7 days at now, right? But was there a time in history that they tried to change that? Because I've heard always kind of people's argument with like, oh, the calendar's never always been 7 days. The Chinese made it 10 at one point.
No, the Chinese have been keeping this seventh day. Yeah. But what they did in the 1911, they
Is Sabbath, before you enter that, is Sabbath the 7th day in the
the
Chinese calendar?
seventh day, yeah.
Okay.
And in 1911 they adopted solar calendar. But before that, we always have only one calendar, which is lunar calendar. But within the lunar calendar, it's still the seventh day. And maybe I can tell you one more interesting incident. In 1986, there was a new science was founded in America. It's called chronobiology,
Okay.
because they discovered the 7 days rhythm in the human body.
Really?
So the professor who was the inventor or discoverer of this new discipline came to China to share his discovery. So we found the 7 days rhythm in the human body. Now we have the new science, biochronology. After he finished, he came to the Chinese University of Traditional Chinese Medicine. So one professor there stood up and said, "Sir, I'm sorry to tell you, what you have discovered, we had it recorded in our medical books 4,000 years ago. The latest would be 1,800 years ago. Nothing new here. Nothing new. 7 days rhythm in the human body. Not only recorded in the Book of Changes, as I showed you, but also recorded in the medical book."
Wow. Wow.
So to say the Sabbath is only for the Jews, I think you got to visit China and find out.
Yeah.
It's not only for the Jews.
Very true.
It's meant for the Chinese, meant for everyone.
Interesting.
I mean, it's really amazing because there was a film that came out years ago called Zeitgeist that they basically tried to disprove Christianity by showing all of these other cultures that had these similar, stories and parallels and things like that, right? But they were using that as an argument to say, see, Christianity just stole it from this. But it's really, truly amazing to see and hear that these things have, it's like almost confirmation that those things that were told to us in the Hebrew Bible is true from God.
Now, for those who are interested in seeing the historical documentation, I have a book called God and the Ancient Chinese.
Cool.
This is you have all the historical documentation at the back as an appendix. So nothing made up. It was all there. That is because the Chinese were exposed to the oral revelation, so they tell exactly the same like what the Bible teaches.
This is a book you wrote?
Yes.
Did you bring one?
I didn't.
Where can we find it?
Can we give one away on the show?
I looked on
And
Amazon.
for those who are interested, call 1-800-245-1844 and you can order a book
Nice
from
number.
Yeah.
And how much is the book?
I don't know, maybe...
Because on
20?
Amazon, it's
I think it's about
$596.
$20.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's about 20.
About 20?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would guess, yeah.
Yeah, probably better to call the number.
1-800-245-1844.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
245.
Very cool. We'll put the link in the description below and so people can find
You
that.
didn't end the number with 8.
I know that's
There
always
but this is the American number. Let me just bring you to the Bible. In Isaiah 49, verse 12, it says, "Behold, this shall come from far, and lo, this from the north and from the west, and this from the land of Sinim." Now you would wonder, what land is that? And so if you look at today, the linguistic root, if you want to say China-U.S. relations, what would you say? Say Sino-U.S. relations.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you check at the Youngest Concordance or Strong's Concordance, it's all referring to a foreign land, maybe China. And the issue is when Isaiah wrote about this, he was writing this 500 years before the name Qin, which is the one here, Sinim, to come into existence. So in a way, it was a prophecy. That dynasty was the one who turned against God, turned away against God. But it was short-lived, only 14 years. So we call ourselves Hans. We call ourselves, we identified ourselves with the next dynasty, Han, not with this one. But this is the one that all the foreign language call us. We call us Chinese. So the Bible is giving a promise, is saying there will be people coming from the north, from the west, and also coming from the land of China to worship God. It's a beautiful promise. In the Chinese ourselves, we call it 中国. The word 国 means kingdom, country. 中 means no deviation from the will of heaven. This is the people, this is the country that follow the mandate of heaven without any slightest deviation. That is the meaning of China
So it's, yeah, it's
in the
like
Chinese.
followers of God's
The
will.
followers of the will of God.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That is how we call ourselves. We call ourselves 中国人. We don't call ourselves Chinese.
And that's widespread across China, or just Bible
that
believers?
is known. That is known in the Chinese among the Chinese.
I mean, that's even more amazing
Yeah.
to me when you think about China outlying Christianity. You know what I mean? Like the whole country, like it's like it has such deep connections and roots to
like-
God. I mean, the name and everything. I had no
Yeah.
idea that was the case.
So how we can call, because we call Chinese, so we don't how we can call it.
Oh, it's okay because
It's
now
okay.
for better communication, this is the way
Oh, okay.
how you do
I've
it.
embraced it.
Yeah,
Okay.
how you do it, and it doesn't matter anymore. But however, in the Chinese, that is the way we call ourselves.
So the word China means
Followers of
中国,
God.
中 means
souls of God,
no deviation.
of a kingdom or something.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Oh yeah.
So many revelations.
You know, God never left Himself without witnessing.
That's right.
Mm.
That is what in Acts what it says. So when the whole world, is turning around, and we're now trying to find scientific evidences. Come on, when you find one, there's another one battling it.
That's right.
Yeah, for thousands of years ago.
So okay, this is one of this. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah.
Hey, here is the one you cannot argue. This is the evidence from the Chinese. You cannot argue from the writings, from the classics, even from the traditions. So historical site, the worship of heaven, all of these are there. How can you argue to say the Chinese didn't know God and they never worship God? It's all there. And then not only that, they are the same with the Bible of God, the Creator God.
Yeah.
That's the one we worship.
Yeah.
So sharing the
amazing.
gospel, sometimes we're thinking, oh no, technology is gonna be reaching China. They're in their own scripture,
It's already there.
History is already there.
So that is for today. I think the meaning for me is that is something we can use to build bridges.
Absolutely.
We have, because many of those cultures are lost, but you have a Bible. Everything what God wants us to know is here.
It's true.
It's complete, and whatever is essential for us is all here. So how do we bring people to the Bible? We need sometimes need to build some bridges.
Exactly. Yeah. I love the way you put that. You're building a bridge. That's exactly what we need to do. And it's amazing how God has, He's reaching out to so many people in so many different times and so many different places, and He's just like, I love you. I want to save you. This is my plan. And it's revealed itself in your very language. It's incredible.
Civilization.
So
So if people want to know more, where can they find? Do you have a YouTube channel? And
I do have a YouTube channel about. I have a documentary about the 8 programs. Is showing our ancestor, the God worshiping tradition. Unfortunately, it's in Chinese, but with English subtitle.
okay, English
English
subtitle.
subtitle. It's called the
usually it's the other way around, but
It
that's
is.
fine.
the ambassador of the Tao. The Tao in the Chinese, the Tao is a God, the Tao is creator, the Tao is a savior, the Tao is the way, the Tao is the truth, the Tao is the life, the Tao is the judgment. The Tao is a word for everything. The Tao is God incarnated. So the Chinese is considered to be the ambassador of that Tao. The only close one is Tao are in heaven, in English. And that could be referred to God. But that's the Chinese sound, the Tao. Tao is our name for God. And there is a YouTube channel for that. I can.
Yeah, we'll put the link in
Yeah,
the
we can put
description.
the link in.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Wang, is that how you say it? Dr. Wang?
It's okay.
I butchered it. Sorry.
Is it Wang?
Wong.
Oh,
Dr. Wang.
Yeah.
Dr. Wong. Thank you so much for being on our show and educating and sharing all this information with us. It's
So
been
amazing.
really fascinating, and I'm sure there's much more that we could learn in his book. So we'll have the phone number and all that information for you guys in the description below if you want to look into this more. And we thank you guys for joining us, and take some time and reflect on this. Think about how God is trying to reach you, and take a look at this extra biblical evidence. It's easy to maybe look at westernized Christianity and discount some of the things in it. But here we have some clear evidence from the East for the very things that we're reading in the Bible. Some of them are even older than what we have written in Western society. So take a look at that. We encourage you, and share with somebody who might need to hear this. And we will see you guys on another episode of LED Live in the future. Thank you for joining us.